The moon watched in silence as Alison made the choice that would ruin her life. Or save it. Its pale glow spilled through the trees like silver blood, illuminating the narrow forest path she had walked 1,000 times before. Tonight, that familiar path felt heavier, as if the earth itself knew what was at stake. Somewhere beyond the woods, torches burned and drums waited to sound, calling her to the mating ceremony that would seal her fate before dawn. She should have been there already. Instead, Alison stood frozen at the edge of the forest, her breath caught painfully in her chest as a low groan drifted through the trees. Her wolf stiffened inside her. Danger. She turned slowly, heart hammering, scanning the undergrowth. The forest answered with shadows and the rustle of leaves, until she saw him. A man lay collapsed near the roots of an ancient oak, his body half swallowed by ferns and darkness. Blood stained the earth beneath him, black in the moonlight, the metallic scent sharp and unmistakable. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath dragged from his lungs with visible effort. Alison, remembering to breathe, every instinct screamed at her to run. Strangers near Packland were never harmless. And this one felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. Even injured, even broken and bleeding, power radiated from him in waves, ancient, heavy. The kind that made her wolf pace restlessly, claws scraping against the inside of her ribs. "Leave him," her wolf urged. "This is not ours." She swallowed hard. Today was her mating day. By sunrise, she was meant to stand before the pack and accept Prince Harry as her mate, whether she wanted him or not. The Alpha King's son. Arrogant, cruel. A man who smiled when others flinched. A man who claimed the moon goddess had bound them together, even though Alison felt nothing when he touched her. No spark, no pull, no bond, only dread. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She had spent her life healing others, patching wounds, saving lives. It was the only place she had ever felt any control. And yet tonight, she was expected to surrender herself completely, to become a possession wrapped in ceremony and duty. Another groan tore from the man's throat, rough and low. Alison took a step forward before she realized she was moving. Moonlight revealed more of him now, broad shoulders straining beneath torn fabric, dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His skin was pale, far too pale for a healthy wolf. Deep gashes marked his side and shoulder, blood seeping steadily despite whatever strength he had left. He wasn't a rogue. She knew rogues. They smelled of desperation and decay. This man smelled of storms and old forests, and something that made her pulse jump uncomfortably. "Alison," her wolf warned again, sharper this time. "This will change everything." She knelt beside him, fingers trembling as she pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse, strong, steady, alive. Her eyes burned. If she walked away, he would die. The wounds were too severe, the blood loss too great. The moon goddess would watch as she turned her back and chose obedience over mercy. And maybe that was what everyone expected of her. But Alison had never been very good at being what others wanted. She exhaled shakily and slid her arm beneath his, bracing herself. He was heavy, far heavier than she anticipated. But desperation lent her strength. His weight sagged against her shoulder as a weak sound escaped him, his head falling forward. "Easy," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. Every step toward her cottage felt like a betrayal. The farther she dragged him from the forest, the farther she moved from the life planned for her. Her arms shook, muscles burning, breath coming in sharp gasps as she stumbled across the clearing toward the small, solitary cottage she called home. Her wolf howled inside her, torn between fear and something dangerously close to curiosity. By the time she reached the door, her palms were slick with blood, his blood, and her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with exertion. She got him inside, lowering him carefully onto the narrow bed near the hearth. As she stepped back, Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating his face fully for the first time. He was beautiful. Not softly, not gently, dangerously. The kind of beauty that belonged on a battlefield or a throne, not bleeding out on a healer's bed. Alison tore her gaze away, guilt flaring sharp and sudden. She had crossed a line. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounded, low and resonant, calling the pack together. The mating ceremony had begun. Her chest tightened painfully as realization crashed over her. She was not where she was supposed to be. And as the moon climbed higher, bathing the cottage in cold light, Alison's wolf went utterly still, every instinct coiling tight with dread. Because fate had noticed her defiance, and it was already moving to answer it. Alison wasted no time. The moment the door shut behind her, the world narrowed to the man bleeding on her bed and the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The distant horn echoed again, followed by the faint roll of drums carried on the night air. Slow, ceremonial, final. She shut the sound out. Fire first. She stoked the hearth until flames leapt to life, casting flickering shadows across the small room. The scent of smoke mingled with iron and damp earth, grounding her even as her heart raced. She rolled up her sleeves, already reaching for clean cloth, water, and the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Her wolf paced relentlessly inside her, claws scraping. "You should not touch him," it warned. "He is not ours." "Quiet," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to the wolf. Her hands were already moving, practiced and steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. She cut away the remnants of his torn shirt, the fabric sticking to clotted blood. His skin was hot beneath her fingers, too hot, and she frowned. Fever. Or something else. Even wounded, even unconscious heat radiated from him, as if his body burned from within. Power hummed beneath his flesh. It made her pause. She had tended warriors before, men scarred by battle, hunters mauled by beasts, but this was different. His muscles twitched as she cleaned the gash along his side, his jaw tightening as pain dragged him back from the edge of unconsciousness. A low sound rumbled in his chest. Her breath caught. For a fleeting moment his eyes fluttered open, golden, sharp, and far too aware for a dying man. They locked onto hers with startling intensity, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or warning. Then his eyes slid shut again, his body sagging back into the bed. Alison swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. She cleaned the wounds carefully, washing away blood with warm water until her fingers were slick and stained red. The smell was overwhelming, iron and sweat and crushed leaves as she ground fresh herbs on the stone slab. Comfrey to knit flesh, yarrow to slow the bleeding. A pinch of moonroot for pain, though she hesitated before adding it. Moonroot dulled the senses. And somehow, she felt he would not appreciate being dulled. Her wolf growled softly at that thought. She bound his wounds tightly, murmuring the old healing chants her mother had taught her. The words settled into the air, ancient and steady, threading calm through her racing heart. Slowly the bleeding slowed, his breathing evened out. Still the power beneath his skin did not fade. If anything, it seemed to coil tighter, restrained, like a storm held back by sheer will. Sweat trickled down her spine as she worked, the heat from the hearth and his body turning the room stifling. Her arms ached, her shoulders burned, but she didn't stop until the last wound was bound and clean. Only then did she sag back on her heels. Silence pressed in around her. The drums outside had stopped. Her heart skipped. She turned slowly toward the window. The moon sat high now, full and merciless, bathing the clearing in silver light. Torches flickered in the distance, moving toward the center of the pack grounds. The mating ceremony was underway. A sharp ache bloomed in her chest, spreading until it felt difficult to breathe. This was it. The moment she had dreaded since Prince Harry first announced his claim. The moment she was meant to stand before the pack and be bound to a man she feared. And she was here, with blood on her hands and a stranger in her bed. Her wolf went unnervingly still. "You have crossed the line," it said quietly. "There is no returning from this." Alison wrapped her arms around herself, nails biting into her palms. Fear crept in then, slow and poisonous. Prince Harry would not take this lightly. He was not a man who accepted defiance, especially not public humiliation. And when she did not appear before the pack, questions would be asked. Accusations would follow. His pride would demand blood. Her mother. The thought struck her like a blow. Her mother was still in the Alpha King's court, still vulnerable, still paying the price for Alison's refusal. If Prince Harry believed Alison had chosen another, had shamed him on the night of their binding. Her stomach twisted violently. A sound from the bed made her jump. The man stirred, his brow furrowing as a faint groan slipped past his lips. She rushed back to his side, lifting his head to give him a few careful sips of broth she had warmed over the fire. His throat worked instinctively, swallowing, though his eyes never opened. "Stay," she whispered, unsure who she was speaking to, the man or herself. "Just stay alive." Her wolf did not respond. It was listening to something else now, a sound beyond the cottage. Alison froze. At first she thought it was her imagination, the echo of fear in her own ears. Then she heard it again. The crunch of boots against gravel, the low murmur of voices, the unmistakable clink of metal. Approaching. Her breath hitched as her wolf surged forward, hackles raised. "They are coming." Her gaze darted to the door, then back to the man on the bed. Panic flared, sharp and blinding. She had defied fate. Now fate had come to collect. The boots stopped just outside her cottage, and someone reached for the door. The knock never came. The door burst open with a violent crack, and slamming against the wall hard enough to rattle the shelves and send dust raining from the beams. Cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the sharp scent of leather, steel, and authority. Prince Harry stepped inside. Torchlight framed him like a cruel crown, his tall form blocking the moon as warriors poured in behind him. His dark eyes swept the cottage with calculated ease, taking in the hearth, the herbs, the bed. And then they stopped. On the blood. Alison's heart slammed against her ribs, but she did not move. Not yet. Her wolf snarled, a low, feral sound that vibrated through her bones. "Hide him! Now!" Harry's nostrils flared as he inhaled deeply, his lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. "Well," he drawled, voice smooth with mockery. "It seems our little healer has been very busy tonight." Alison's mind snapped into motion. Before anyone could step farther inside, she moved, fast. She crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to her knees beside the center table. Her fingers hooked into the iron ring hidden beneath the woven rug, and with a grunt of effort, she yanked. The hatch opened with a dull creak. The cellar yawned beneath her, dark, narrow, and just deep enough. The man on the bed stirred as she dragged him toward it, her muscles screaming in protest. His weight pressed heavily against her, but fear lent her strength once more. She lowered him carefully into the darkness below, wincing as he groaned softly. She leaned down, her mouth close to his ear. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, voice shaking. "No matter what happens." Then she closed the hatch, slid the rug back into place, and stood just as Harry took another step forward. Too late. He had seen the movement. His gaze snapped to her, sharp and glittering. "What was that?" Alison forced her shoulders back, lifting her chin. "Nothing." Harry laughed softly, the sound devoid of warmth. "You lie poorly when you're afraid." She said nothing. He gestured lazily to the warriors. "Search the place." They fanned out immediately, boots thudding against the wooden floor, hands shoving aside furniture, tearing through shelves and storage chests. One overturned a basket of dried herbs, sending leaves scattering like crushed dreams across the floor. Alison stood still in the center of it all, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they could hear it. Harry approached her slowly, circling like a predator. "You didn't attend your mating ceremony," he said quietly. "Do you know what that means?" "I was ill," Alison replied, her voice steady despite the lie. His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to hurt. He forced her to meet his gaze. "You insult me," he said softly. "You insult the pack. You humiliate me before the council." She wrenched her face free. "I owe you nothing." The air went deadly still. Harry's smile vanished. "A bold thing to say," he murmured, eyes darkening. "For a woman who belongs to me." Alison felt her wolf surge, rage burning hot and dangerous. "I belong to no one," but she held her tongue. One of the guards reported back. "No sign of anyone, my prince." Harry's gaze flicked briefly to the center of the room, to the table, the rug beneath it. For one terrifying moment, Alison thought he knew, but then he scoffed. "Of course not." He straightened, voice rising. "That doesn't change the truth. You were absent tonight, and absence speaks louder than denial." His eyes bored into her. "Tell me, healer, were you entertaining a lover instead of honoring your bond?" The word lover burned. Alison shook her head. "There was no one here." Harry laughed again, cruel and loud. "Do you take me for a fool? The scent is everywhere." Her stomach twisted. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You've made a mockery of me, of fate itself." She met his stare unflinchingly. "Then perhaps fate was never on your side." His hand cracked across her face. The blow snapped her head to the side, pain blooming sharp and hot across her cheek. The room went utterly silent. Harry's voice dropped to a whisper. "Arrest her." Hands grabbed her arms before she could react, iron grips biting into her flesh. Her wolf thrashed violently, roaring for blood, but Alison forced herself to stay upright. "Take her," Harry continued calmly, "and let the pack see what happens when someone thinks they can defy me." They dragged her toward the door. As she crossed the threshold, she risked one last glance at the table, the hatch hidden beneath it, the man she had saved lying silent below. "Live," she pleaded silently. "Please." The door slammed shut behind her. Dawn broke cruel and bright as they hauled her through the streets. The sun burned her bare feet with every step, gravel cutting into her skin. But Alison did not cry out. Her hands were bound, her hair loose and tangled, her face still throbbing from the strike. But she held her head high. Harry rode ahead on horseback, his posture relaxed, satisfied. This was not just punishment, it was spectacle. And as the heat of the rising sun bore down on her, Alison understood one terrible truth with aching clarity. This was only the beginning. Each step Alison took sent a fresh wave of pain through her bare feet, the sun-heated stones unforgiving against torn skin. Dust clung to her ankles, sweat slid down her spine, and the rope biting into her wrists burned with every jolt as the guards dragged her forward. Whispers followed her, some filled with scorn, some heavy with pity. "That's her. The healer. She missed the ceremony. They say she had a lover." Alison kept her eyes forward, jaw locked. She would not look for sympathy. She would not beg for it. Still, she heard everything. Some voices were sharp with judgment, laced with fear. Others trembled with pity. "A foolish girl," one man muttered. "No," a woman whispered back. "A brave one." A child clutched his mother's skirt as Alison passed, eyes wide. The woman pulled him closer, as if defiance were contagious. "Poor thing," an elderly woman murmured, barely loud enough to be heard. "Could you blame her?" Another hissed sharply. Quiet, do you want to die? Alison's chest tightened, not with shame, but with something dangerously close to pride. They knew. Even if they were too afraid to say it aloud, they knew what marrying Prince Harry meant. They knew the cage disguised as a crown. The way women who caught his interest slowly disappeared behind palace walls, their spirits hollowed out. Harry rode ahead of the procession, tall and composed atop his black horse. He didn't turn back, didn't need to. He could feel the fear trailing him like incense. This humiliation, this spectacle, was his language. Alison refused to give him what he wanted. She didn't stumble. She didn't cry. Her wolf burned hot and furious beneath her skin, pacing, snarling, demanding blood. Alison forced it down, holding herself together through sheer will. The Alpha King's court loomed ahead, massive black stone rising against the sky, its obsidian towers swallowing the sunlight. Guards lined the entrance, their faces grim as Alison was hauled past them. Inside, the air was cool and heavy. The council hall opened before her in a sweep of stone and shadow. Pillars carved with ancient runes stretched toward the high ceiling. Torches flickered along the walls, their flames reflecting off polished floors worn smooth by centuries of power. At the far end sat the obsidian throne. The Alpha King filled it completely. He was immense, broad, unmoving, his presence pressing down on the room like a physical weight. His expression was carved from stone, eyes cold and unreadable as Alison was dragged forward and forced to her knees. She did not bow. The guards shoved her again, harder this time. Bow! One hissed. Alison lifted her head instead. A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles. Some stared at her in disbelief. Others watched with thinly veiled fear, as though expecting blood to spill at any moment. Prince Harry dismounted and strode into the hall, boots echoing loudly against the floor. He stopped beside her, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. Father, he said smoothly, inclining his head toward the throne. I present to you Alison, the healer who chose disgrace over destiny. The Alpha King's gaze settled fully on her. It felt like standing beneath a collapsing mountain. You were summoned, the king said, his voice deep and cold. You did not come. Alison swallowed, her throat dry. I was unable. A lie, but one that did not matter. Harry laughed softly. Unable, he repeated. Or unwilling. He turned to the council, spreading his hands theatrically. On the very night she was meant to be bound to me by the moon goddess, she vanished. Imagine my surprise when I learned she had been otherwise occupied. The words slithered through the hall. Infidelity. Gasps echoed from the nobles. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. Is this true? Alison rose to her feet despite the guard's grip. Her voice rang clear through the chamber. I owe no man my body, not you, not your son, not the moon goddess herself. Shock froze the room. Harry's smile sharpened. Listen to her, he said softly. Still defiant, still pretending virtue while the scent of another clings to her skin. Alison's hands curled into fists. You smell what you want to smell. Harry's eyes flashed. Enough. He turned to his father. She humiliated me before the council, before the pack. She rejected her fated mate and chose a lover instead. That is a lie, Alison snapped. Harry leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for her. Then where is he? Her silence was answer enough. The Alpha King shifted on his throne, the stone beneath him groaning faintly. Alison, he said slowly, you will defend yourself. Now. She lifted her chin. It is of no use. The king's brows drew together. Explain yourself. She met his gaze without flinching. Whether I tell the truth or not, judgment has already been decided. A murmur surged through the hall again. Unease, tension, fear. Harry's patience snapped. "Bring her in," he ordered. The side doors opened with a heavy creak. Chains clinked. Alison's breath caught painfully in her chest as her mother was dragged into the hall, wrists bound, hair disheveled, eyes red from crying. "No," Alison whispered, the word tearing from her throat before she could stop it. Her mother stumbled, nearly falling before guards yanked her upright. When her gaze lifted and met Alison's, something soft and fierce passed between them. Love, pride, and a silent plea to stand strong. Harry smiled, and in that moment, Alison knew. This was not justice. This was theater, and the final act was about to begin. The chains rattled as Alison's mother was forced to her knees. The sound echoed too loudly in the council hall, sharp and final, like a door slamming shut on hope. Alison's breath came shallow, her chest tight as if an unseen hand had wrapped around her heart and begun to squeeze. Her mother lifted her head despite the guard's grip. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from tears, yet there was no fear in them, only sorrow and an unyielding strength that had defined her all Alison's life. Prince Harry stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. He drew his sword. The whisper of steel leaving its sheath sliced through the hall, sending a tremor through the gathered nobles. The blade caught the torchlight, gleaming cold and merciless as Harry placed its edge beneath her mother's chin. Gasps rippled through the room. "Now," Harry said softly, almost pleasantly, "we will see how stubborn you truly are." Alison's wolf surged forward in blind fury, slamming against the walls of her restraint. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to stay still, to stay upright. "Beg," Harry continued, "beg for her life, confess your betrayal, apologize to me." Her mother shook her head faintly, tears spilling freely now. "Alison, don't," she whispered. "Do not bow to monsters." Alison's hands trembled, nails digging into her palms until pain grounded her. Her entire body screamed at her to fall to her knees, to do whatever it took to save the woman who had raised her, protected her, loved her without condition. But she knew Harry. She knew this would not end with mercy. He wanted to break her, to own her spirit the way he had tried to own her body. The council watched in suffocating silence. Not one of them stepped forward. Not one. Alison turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across the nobles, the men and women who had smiled at her since childhood, who had praised her healing hands, who had eaten at her table. "Look at you," she said, her voice trembling but loud. "All of you." Some flinched, others looked away. "My father died fighting for truth," she continued, fire rising through her grief. "He bled for this pack, believing justice still lived within these walls, and you—" Her voice broke, then hardened. "You would rather kneel to fear than stand for what is right." "Enough," the Alpha King thundered, rising from the obsidian throne. Alison ignored him. "You hide behind crowns and councils," she spat. "While tyrants rule in your name. You are not leaders. You are chains." Harry's face twisted with rage. "So noble," he snarled. "So proud." He pressed the blade harder against her mother's throat. Alison's mother met her eyes one last time. "Live," she mouthed. Steel flashed. The sound was wet, horrifyingly final. Blood spilled across the black stone floor, stark and vivid against the obsidian. Her mother collapsed forward, chains clattering uselessly as her body stilled. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then Alison screamed. The sound tore from her chest, raw and animal, carrying every ounce of pain she had been holding back. Her wolf howled in agony, a keening cry that echoed through her soul. The nobles erupted into chaos. Some cried out. Some dropped to their knees. Others recoiled as if the blood itself might touch them. "You fool!" one elder shouted desperately. "Have you lost your mind? The moon goddess will curse us for this." "Enough blood," another pleaded. You cannot wipe out an entire family in one day. The Alpha King stood rigid, his jaw clenched, eyes flicking from Alison's mother's body to the horrified faces of the council. Fear, real fear, cracked his composure. Harry stood panting, sword dripping red, satisfaction and madness warring in his gaze. Kill her too, Harry demanded, pointing the blade at Alison. Finish it. Alison lifted her head slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes hollow, but there was no begging in them, only something cold and unbreakable. The Alpha King raised a hand. Enough, he said sharply. The hall fell silent once more. He looked down at Alison, his gaze heavy with judgment. For your insolence, for your defiance, for the dishonor you have brought upon this court. He paused. You are banished. A shocked murmur rippled through the room. You will leave this kingdom before nightfall, the king continued. You will never return. If you do, you will die. Harry whirled on him. Father, silence, the Alpha King snapped. This is my decree. Alison was hauled to her feet once more. She did not resist. She did not speak. As they dragged her from the council hall, she did not look back at the throne, the blood, or the man who had murdered her mother. She walked, hollowed, shattered, but not broken. Because as her tears fell silently onto the stone floor, one truth burned brighter than her grief. They had taken everything from her, and one day they would pay for it. Alison did not remember how she found her way back to the cottage. Her feet moved on instinct alone, carrying her through familiar paths, while her mind remained trapped in the echo of steel cutting flesh, in the sound of her mother's body striking stone. The world felt distant, muffled, as though she were walking through water instead of air. The sun was already sinking when the cottage finally came into view. For a moment, just a fragile, foolish moment, hope stirred in her chest. She pushed the door open. Silence greeted her. No fire crackled in the hearth. No labored breathing filled the room. The scent of blood had faded, replaced only by cold ash and wilted herbs. The bed was empty. The blankets lay neatly folded, untouched. He was gone. Alison stood there unmoving, staring at the space where the stranger had lain only hours ago. Her chest tightened painfully, breath stuttering as something sharp lodged itself beneath her ribs. Of course he was gone. Why wouldn't he be? She had been a fool to expect otherwise. To believe that saving a stranger might mean anything at all. To think, even for a heartbeat, that he would wait for her. That he would care. Her wolf whined softly, curling in on itself. Don't, Alison whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. Don't make excuses for him. The silence pressed heavier with every step she took into the room. She checked the cellar, heart pounding stupidly fast. Empty. The hatch stood open just enough to mock her. No blood, no body, no sign that he had ever been there at all. The realization struck deep. The man she had risked everything for, the man she had chosen over fate, over duty, over safety, had vanished without a word. And because of that choice, her mother was dead. A sob clawed its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down, teeth clenched until her jaw ached. Crying here felt pointless. This place, once her sanctuary, now felt like a grave. She moved mechanically, gathering what little she owned. A spare dress, her herb pouch, a worn knife. Nothing else mattered. Nothing else belonged to her anymore. Before she left, she paused at the doorway, looking back one last time. This cottage had held her childhood, her laughter, her mother's voice. It had been the only place she had ever felt safe. Now it was just wood and stone. She closed the door softly and turned her back on it forever. The forest swallowed her whole. She walked until the stars faded and the sun rose again. And then she kept walking. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharp and relentless. Thirst burned her throat until swallowing became painful. Her feet blistered, then bled, but she did not stop. Each step felt like penance, like punishment she deserved for choosing herself when her mother had paid the price. The second night was worse. The cold crept into her bones, sleep coming only in brief, restless fragments. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow looked like pursuit. Her wolf stayed silent, withdrawn, as if grieving in its own way. By the third morning, the world began to blur. Trees bent and swayed where they shouldn't. The sky felt too bright, the air too thin. Alison stumbled more often than she walked, her legs trembling violently beneath her. She reached the edge of a forest she did not recognize, its trees tall and dense, their canopies woven tightly together. Relief flickered weakly through her. Shelter. She took one step forward, and the world tilted. Her knees hit the ground hard. Pain flared briefly, then dulled as exhaustion swallowed everything else. She tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out, strength completely spent. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel of light. This is it, she thought distantly. So this is how it ends? Her wolf stirred faintly, a weak whimper echoing through her chest. I'm sorry, Alison murmured, unsure whether she meant it for her wolf, her mother, or herself. Darkness closed in. Warmth. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the harsh heat of the sun or the fevered burn of infection, but steady, gentle warmth, wrapping around her like a cocoon. Her body felt heavy, unresponsive, yet oddly safe. A soft crackling sound reached her ears. Fire. Her lashes fluttered open. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. Wooden beams, darkened by age and smoke. A thick blanket covered her, tucked carefully around her shoulders. The scent of herbs lingered in the air, mingling with something richer, something familiar. Her heart stuttered. She tried to move, but her limbs protested weakly. Then a voice spoke. Low, calm, unmistakable. Finally, it said quietly, "You're awake." Alison's breath caught as her gaze shifted toward the sound. And there, standing near the hearth, bathed in firelight, was the last person she ever expected to see again. The man who had vanished. For a moment, Alison thought the exhaustion had finally taken her mind. The man by the hearth looked unreal, solid and alive, framed by flickering firelight, his broad shoulders casting long shadows across the cabin walls. He was no longer pale or bleeding. The wounds she had treated were wrapped in clean bindings, his posture steady, controlled. Power rolled off him in quiet waves, no longer leaking through broken flesh but coiled tightly beneath the surface. Her heart lurched painfully. You! Her voice cracked as she tried to sit up, failing when dizziness washed over her. The world tilted, and strong hands were suddenly there, steadying her shoulders. Easy, he said, firm but not unkind. You've been unconscious for most of the day. She shoved his hands away weakly. How did you find me? He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted a wooden cup to her lips. Drink. The command in his voice stirred something sharp and unwelcome in her chest. She turned her head away. I asked you something. And I said drink, he replied calmly. Not harsh, not threatening, just certain. Her stomach betrayed her with a loud, humiliating growl. Heat rushed to her face. Her body, traitor that it was, leaned toward the cup even as her pride resisted. She took a small sip, then another, the cool water soothing the fire in her throat. When she finished, he offered her a bowl of thick broth. The scent alone made her mouth water painfully. Eat first, he said. We'll talk after. She wanted to refuse. Truly, she did. But her hands shook as she accepted the bowl, hunger overwhelming resentment. She ate slowly, carefully, her gaze never leaving him as he watched from a short distance away. He didn't rush her. didn't press. When the bowl was empty and her body felt marginally less fragile, she set it aside with shaking fingers. "Now," she said quietly. "You left." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or something heavier. "I had to," he said. Alison's chest tightened. "You couldn't leave a note? A word?" Her voice rose despite her effort to keep it steady. "I came back to an empty cottage. I thought—" She stopped herself, jaw clenching. "I thought you didn't care." He stepped closer, stopping just short of the bed. "If I had stayed, they would have found me," he said. "And then they would have killed you." Her laugh was brittle. "They killed my mother anyway." The words fell between them like a blade. He went still. For a long moment, he said nothing. The fire crackled softly, shadows dancing across his face. His jaw tightened, muscles in his neck flexing as if he were holding something back. "I saw the commotion from the forest," he said finally. "The guards, the torches. I waited until they left before I moved. I didn't know—" His voice faltered just slightly. "I didn't know what it would cost you." She looked away. Her chest ached with unshed grief, with images she refused to relive. Blood on black stone. Her mother's eyes. The sound of her own scream echoing in a hall that had never cared. "I don't want to talk about it," Alison said flatly. He nodded once. "All right." There was no pressure in his agreement, no insistence. It unsettled her more than any demand could have. She shifted under the blanket, suddenly aware of how close he stood, of the way her wolf stirred faintly at his presence. Confused, restless, but not afraid. "Why help me now?" she asked quietly. "You could have kept going." His gaze softened. "I wasn't going to leave you in the forest to die." The simplicity of it stole her breath. Silence settled again, thick but not uncomfortable. Outside, wind whispered through the trees, brushing against the cabin walls like a living thing. "I never thanked you," he said after a moment. "For saving my life." She scoffed softly. "You don't owe me anything." "I do," he replied. "More than you know." She studied him then, really studied him. The strength in his frame, the scars just visible beneath his sleeves. The quiet discipline in the way he stood, like a man used to command but choosing restraint. Her wolf shifted, uneasy but intrigued. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated just briefly. "Matthew." The name settled into the space between them, solid and unassuming. She nodded once. "Alison." "I know," he said gently. That should have unsettled her. Instead, she was suddenly very tired. "I want to be alone," she said, pulling the blanket higher around herself. Matthew inclined his head. "I'll be outside if you need anything." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused. "Rest," he added quietly. When the door closed behind him, the cabin felt larger and emptier. Alison stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, emotions tangled and unresolved. Gratitude warred with resentment. Relief clashed with grief. And beneath it all, her wolf paced, sensing something dangerous and unfinished. She closed her eyes. For now, retreat felt safer than answers. The days passed quietly. Too quietly. For 5 sunrises and 5 moonsets, Alison remained in the small cabin tucked deep within the forest, the world beyond its walls reduced to birdsong, wind through pine needles, and the steady rhythm of Matthew's movements. Grief still weighed heavily on her chest, but it no longer suffocated her. Instead, it settled into a dull, constant ache, one she learned to carry in silence. Matthew never asked her to leave the bed. He never urged her to talk. Each morning, she woke to the scent of food, simple meals, warm and nourishing, left within reach. Each evening, the fire was fed, the cabin cleaned, and fresh water brought in. He moved with quiet efficiency, as if caring for her was something he had done many times before, though his eyes carried a sadness that suggested otherwise. Alison watched him when she thought he wasn't looking. He rose before dawn every day, slipping outside with barely a sound. When he returned, sweat darkened his shirt, and his breathing was controlled, but heavy. She noticed the way he favored his left side when he thought no one was paying attention, the brief tightening of his jaw when he stretched his shoulder too far. Pain, not just physical. Her wolf noticed too. Every time Matthew entered the room, her wolf stirred, sometimes pacing, sometimes pressing closer to the surface of her skin, restless and confused. It did not bare its teeth. It did not retreat. It watched him, judged him, recognized something it did not yet understand. On the 5th day, Alison finally left the bed. She wrapped herself in a thick cloak and stepped outside, blinking against the brightness of the morning sun. The forest greeted her with cool air and bird song, the ground soft beneath her feet. Matthew stood several paces away, splitting wood with smooth, powerful swings of his axe. Muscles flexed beneath his skin with each motion, controlled and precise. He moved like a man used to discipline, trained not just in strength, but in restraint. He noticed her immediately. "Feeling stronger?" he asked, setting the axe aside. She nodded once and walked toward the fallen log near the clearing, lowering herself onto it. For a while, she simply watched him stack the wood neatly beside the cabin. Finally, she spoke. "You're in pain." He stilled. Slowly, he turned to face her. "Everyone carries pain." "Yours is different," she said. "You hide it too well." Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or wariness. "I don't see how that concerns you." Alison met his gaze steadily. "You let me bleed in silence. I'm returning the favor." The corner of his mouth twitched faintly. "Fair enough." He wiped his hands on his trousers and leaned against a tree, posture deceptively relaxed. "I feel guilty," he said quietly. "If I hadn't been there, none of this would have happened to you." Her chest tightened. "That's not true," she said firmly. "I was a healer before anything else. I did what I was meant to do." She paused. "And I was never going to marry him." Matthew studied her, as if weighing something. Then he nodded. "I see that now." Silence stretched between them, but it felt different, less sharp, less heavy. "I'm sorry," Alison said suddenly. The words surprised even her. "For how I treated you. You fed me, sheltered me, and I—" She looked away. "I blamed you for my pain." "You had every right to," he replied without hesitation. "You lost everything." Something in his voice softened her chest. For the first time since she had awakened in the cabin, Alison felt her resentment loosen its grip. Her wolf exhaled slowly. "Staying alive out here won't be easy," Matthew said after a moment. "You're strong, but strength alone won't protect you." She lifted her chin. "Then teach me." He raised a brow. "You're sure?" "I won't be helpless again," she said quietly. Something like approval crossed his features. That afternoon, training began. At first, it was brutal. Matthew taught her how to stand, how to move, how to strike without wasting energy. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed, and more than once she ended up on the ground, breathless and frustrated. But she learned. Quickly. He showed her how to use her surroundings, how to turn her smaller size into an advantage, how to listen, to the forest, to her instincts, to her wolf. Between exercises, he spoke of survival, tracking, shelter, defense. Alison absorbed it all, her healer's mind cataloging information with sharp focus. And through it all, something shifted. They laughed, briefly, unexpectedly, when she managed to trip him with a clever move. Their eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Their wolves brushed against each other beneath the surface, cautious but curious. That night, as Alison sat by the fire nursing sore muscles, Matthew handed her a cup of tea laced with herbs she recognized. "For healing," he said. She accepted it, fingers brushing his. A spark jumped between them, small, startling, neither spoke of it. But as the fire crackled and the moon rose high above the trees, Alison felt it clearly for the first time. This was no longer just survival. A fragile bond was forming, and both their wolves knew it. The night came quietly. Too quietly. The fire had burned low, embers glowing faintly as Alison lay half asleep beneath her blanket, muscles aching pleasantly from training. Outside, the forest breathed, wind through leaves, the distant call of an owl. Normal, safe. Her wolf lifted its head. Wrong, it warned. Alison's eyes snapped open. She lay still, listening. At first she heard nothing. Then, there, a faint crunch of leaves, too deliberate, too heavy to be an animal. Her heart began to pound, slow and steady, the way Matthew had taught her to breathe when danger approached. She slipped from the bed without a sound and reached for the small knife she kept close. The blade felt reassuring in her palm, cool and familiar. Across the cabin, Matthew was already awake, standing near the door, body taut and alert. Their eyes met. He nodded once. The first strike came without warning. The cabin door exploded inward, wood splintering as armed men poured inside. Steel flashed in the firelight. Shouts filled the air, sharp and brutal. "Take the girl alive!" The command confirmed what Alison already knew. "They are here for me." Matthew moved first. He became a blur of motion, fast, precise, lethal. He disarmed the first attacker with a sharp twist of the wrist and drove his elbow into the man's throat with bone-crushing force. Another lunged from the side, and Matthew pivoted smoothly, grabbing the man's arm and snapping it back until it broke with a sickening crack. Alison barely had time to watch. A guard rushed her, sword raised. Her wolf surged forward, fear dissolving into pure instinct. She didn't think. She moved, just as Matthew had taught her. She ducked beneath the swing, heart hammering, and drove her knife upward into the man's chest. The blade slid between ribs with horrifying ease. His eyes widened, mouth opening in a silent gasp as he collapsed at her feet. For a heartbeat, Alison stared at him. Dead. Her first kill. Her hands trembled violently, bile rising in her throat. "Move!" her wolf snarled. Another attacker was already upon her. Alison rolled aside as steel bit into the floor, where she had stood moments before. She scrambled to her feet, lungs burning, and grabbed a fallen torch. Flames roared as she swung it blindly, forcing the man back long enough for Matthew to reach her. Matthew's face was no longer calm. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf fully unleashed. He cut through the remaining attackers like a storm given flesh. Every movement controlled, devastating. He didn't waste energy. Didn't hesitate. By the time Alison regained her footing, bodies littered the cabin floor, blood soaking into the wooden planks. One man broke away, panic in his eyes. He ran. Matthew turned as if to pursue, then stopped abruptly, nostrils flaring. He listened, then swore under his breath. "Let him go," he said sharply. "Others will come." The forest swallowed the fleeing warrior whole. Silence descended, broken only by Alison's ragged breathing and the crackle of dying flames. Her knees buckled. Matthew caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her with strong hands. "You did well," he said firmly. "Look at me." She forced her gaze up to his. "You survived," he continued. "That's what matters." Her chest heaved as the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. She had taken a life. Not as a healer. Not as a protector. But as a survivor. Her wolf settled, shaken but resolute. Matthew guided her to sit, quickly checking her for wounds. When he was satisfied she was unharmed, he straightened, jaw tight with barely contained fury. "This wasn't random," he said. "These men weren't bandits." Alison wiped blood from her hands, her stomach twisting. "I know." "They knew exactly where to find you," he continued. "And they were under orders to bring you back alive." His gaze locked onto hers. "Why?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Images flooded her mind. Prince Harry's smile, her mother's blood pooling on obsidian, the weight of chains, the decree of banishment. Her throat closed painfully. Matthew watched her struggle, understanding dawning slowly across his face. "This isn't just about a rejected mating, is it?" She shook her head faintly. He crouched in front of her, lowering himself to her level. "Alison," he said quietly, "whoever sent them won't stop. Not now. Not after tonight." The fire had burned down to embers by the time Alison finished telling him everything. Her voice grew hoarse as the night stretched on, words spilling out in fragments at first. Then in a relentless tide she could no longer hold back. She told him about the mating ceremony, the way Prince Harry had smiled as if she were already owned. She told him about the claim of fate that never sparked in her chest, about the cage disguised as devotion. She told him about her mother. Her hands shook as she spoke of chains clinking against stone, of steel flashing beneath torchlight, of blood blooming dark against the obsidian floor. She did not spare herself. She admitted the guilt that clawed at her, the part of her that wondered if obedience might have saved her mother's life. "And then they banished me," she finished quietly, "because killing us both in one day would anger the moon goddess." Silence swallowed the cabin. Matthew stood near the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid. The shadows stretched long across the floor, flickering with each faint stir of the embers. When he turned, Alison barely recognized him. His eyes blazed gold. No, not gold. Something deeper. Older. Power pressed outward from him like a living thing, filling the cabin until the air felt thick and electric. Her wolf shrank back in instinctive awe, then lifted its head, uncertain but alert. Matthew's hands clenched into fists. For a terrifying moment, Alison thought the cabin itself might splinter under the force of his rage. "He murdered her," Matthew said, each word measured and deadly calm. "For daring to say no." Alison nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. He enjoyed it. Something broke. Matthew's control shattered in a sharp exhale as he slammed his fist into the wall. Wood cracked, splintering beneath the impact. The sound echoed through the cabin, raw and violent. Alison flinched, but not in fear. She felt it then, unmistakably. This was not the rage of a reckless man. This was the fury of an alpha. Matthew turned back to her slowly, as if afraid of what he might do if he moved too fast. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, stripped bare. "They will pay for this." Her heart skipped painfully. "You can't fight them," she said. "He's the prince. His father is the Alpha King." Matthew's lips curved into something bitter. "No," he said softly. "He isn't." She stared at him. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward as he took a step closer. "I am." The words hung between them, heavy and impossible. Alison shook her head. "That's not... Everyone knows the Alpha King went mad, that he killed his wife and unborn child before fleeing." Matthew's jaw tightened. "That is the lie my uncle told." Her breath caught. He knelt in front of her then, lowering himself so they were eye level. The power around him receded slightly, restrained once more, but it did not disappear. "My father was the Alpha King," Matthew said, "and I was his heir. My uncle coveted the throne. Slowly, carefully, he poisoned my mate, my wife, and our unborn child. When their bodies failed, He planned to finish the work by framing me for their deaths. Alison's chest ached as she listened, horror creeping through her veins. A maid overheard the plan, Matthew continued. She warned me. I fled before the guards could take me, before my uncle could put a blade in my hand and blood on my name. He swallowed hard. By the time I was strong enough to return, he had bought the loyalty of most of the council, threatened the rest. They declared me mad, dangerous, dead. The pieces clicked into place with brutal clarity. The power, the discipline, the restraint wrapped around something vast and lethal. "You're the missing Alpha King," Alison whispered. Matthew nodded once. "In exile." She rose unsteadily to her feet, heart pounding for an entirely new reason now. Love, real, aching love, twisted painfully in her chest, tangled with fear. Power corrupted. She had seen it firsthand. Her mother's blood was proof of that truth. "I can't," Alison said quietly, backing away a step. "I can't love someone tied to a throne. I won't be owned again. I won't watch another good man become a monster because of power." Matthew's expression softened. Not wounded, not angry. Understanding. "The throne is only a tool," he said gently. "It does not change who we are. It only reveals it." He stood and approached her slowly, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth, his presence. "I don't want you because fate demands it," he said. "Or because a crown says I can. I want you because you chose me when you had every reason not to." Her throat tightened. "I will restore what was stolen," he continued. "Your dignity, your justice, but only if you choose to stand with me." He lifted a hand, then stopped, giving her space. "And if you don't, if you choose to walk away, I will protect you anyway, with my life. The choice, real, unforced." Her wolf surged forward, pressing against her chest, howling in recognition. Alison exhaled shakily. "You give me what no one ever has." Matthew tilted his head. "What's that?" "A choice." She stepped closer before fear could reclaim her. "I love you," Matthew said quietly. "Not as a demand, not as a claim, as truth." Something inside her finally settled. Alison reached for him, fingers curling into his shirt. "Why, then stand with me," she whispered. "Not above me, beside me." His breath caught. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, reverent, almost hesitant. Then the dam broke. Months of restraint, years of loss, and days of unspoken longing poured into that single moment. Their wolves surged together beneath the moonlit sky, recognizing what their hearts had already chosen. Trust. At last, Alison let herself believe it. She was no longer alone. And the king in exile had finally come home. They traveled before dawn. The forest seemed to part for Matthew as they moved deeper into land Alison had never known existed. Paths hidden beneath moss revealed themselves beneath his steps, ancient markers carved into stone guiding them through valleys veiled by mist. Alison rode behind him on horseback, arms wrapped lightly around his waist, her senses sharp with anticipation and unease. When the trees finally thinned, she gasped. A village lay hidden in the hollow of the land, fires burning, tents and wooden structures arranged with deliberate order. Warriors moved through the camp, some shifting between human and wolf with easy familiarity. Steel glinted. Banners bearing an old crest, one Alison recognized from childhood stories, fluttered in the morning breeze. Matthew dismounted first. The moment his boots touched the ground, everything stopped. One by one, warriors turned. Conversations died mid-word. Then, as if moved by a single breath, they dropped to one knee. "All hail the true Alpha King!" The sound thundered through the valley. Alison's heart slammed against her ribs as Matthew turned, helping her down gently. He did not look surprised, only solemn, as if this weight had never truly left his shoulders. "These are the ones who never stopped believing," he said quietly to her. men and women loyal to my father, and to the truth. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was older than Alison, with sharp eyes and a strength that radiated from her posture alone. When she bowed to Matthew, it was with reverence, and when she looked at Alison, curiosity softened into warmth. "This is Sharon," Matthew said. "She's the one who warned me, who saved my life." Sharon took Alison's hands without hesitation. "Then you are the woman who saved him again." Alison blinked back sudden emotion. "I just did what I could." Sharon smiled knowingly. That is always how history begins. Later that day, Matthew stood before the gathered warriors, his voice carrying easily across the camp. He spoke of betrayal, of poison and lies, of a kingdom ruled by fear instead of justice. His words did not inflame, they steadied. When he finished, he reached for Alison's hand. "This woman," he said, "stood against a prince when she had everything to lose. She healed when she was told to submit. She fought when she was hunted. She is my chosen mate, if she accepts me." All eyes turned to her. Alison's breath caught. He had given her the choice again. Publicly. Deliberately. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. "I stand with him," she said clearly, "not because of fate, but because he sees me." The camp erupted, not in chaos but approval. Fists struck chests, wolves howled. Respect settled around her like a mantle she hadn't known she needed. In the days that followed, Alison earned her place. She trained beside warriors twice her size, fell and rose again without complaint. She tended wounds, mixed herbs, strengthened the sick. Slowly, skepticism gave way to trust. That night, beneath a canvas tent lit by lantern glow, the world finally quieted. Matthew and Alison sat together in silence at first, the weight of what was coming pressing close. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "If tomorrow goes badly," he began. She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Tonight is ours." Their kiss was unhurried, deep with promise. Clothing was shed not in desperation, but trust. They came together slowly, learning each other in the hush of shared breath and warmth. No rush, no need to prove anything. Just two souls choosing each other. Later, wrapped together beneath furs, Alison rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "For the first time," she murmured, "I'm not afraid of tomorrow." Matthew kissed her hair. "Whatever comes, we face it together." A horn sounded in the distance, urgent, sharp. Matthew was on his feet instantly. A scout burst into the camp. "Prince Harry?" he announced grimly. "He's marching with an army, disguised as rogues." The night seemed to hold its breath. War had come. Steel met steel beneath a sky torn open by fire and fury. The disguised army struck at dawn, pouring out of the tree line like a plague, their rogue banners nothing more than a lie stitched over royal ambition. Prince Harry rode at the center, armored and confident, his sneer already carved into his face, until he saw what waited for him. Matthew's army did not panic. They stood. Warriors loyal to the true king shifted seamlessly between human and wolf, their formation unbreakable. Howls split the air, ancient and commanding, rolling through the valley like thunder. Alison stood beside Matthew, not behind him. When the first wave hit, chaos erupted. Blades clashed, wolves lunged, blood darkened the earth. Alison moved as she had been trained, precise, grounded, lethal when she had to be. She fought not with rage but purpose. A warrior charged her from the left. She ducked, slashed, rolled clear. Another came from behind. Matthew intercepted, ending the threat with brutal efficiency. Their movements flowed together, instinctive, seamless, partners. Harry watched from a distance, disbelief spreading across his features, as his forces crumbled far faster than expected. These were not frightened villagers. These were soldiers, loyal, prepared, and they were winning. Within moments, the battle was over. Harry was dragged from his horse, armor dented, pride shattered. He screamed threats as chains were locked around his wrists, spitting words of royal entitlement that no longer carried weight. "You're nothing," he snarled at Alison as she passed him. She stopped, looked down at him, and smiled. The march back to the kingdom was slow and deliberate. Harry was chained behind Alison's horse, stumbling through dust and stone just as she once had. The people poured into the streets as they approached, disbelief turning into something raw and ferocious when they saw who knelt in chains. Stones flew, curses rained down, years of fear found voice. Matthew did not stop them. At the gates of the court, the Alpha King waited with what remained of his guard, until Matthew dismounted and stepped forward. "I am the Alpha King," Matthew declared, his voice carrying across the square. "Your rightful ruler." He spoke the truth aloud, about poison and betrayal, about a murdered queen and unborn heir, about how fear had been used to chain the kingdom. Sharon stepped forward, bearing witness. Others followed. The guards hesitated. Then one by one they dropped their weapons. The Alpha King raged, cursed. She threatened, but it meant nothing now. He was arrested. In the court where blood had once stained obsidian, Harry was forced to kneel. Matthew turned to Alison. "Justice," he said, "is yours to decide?" She took the sword without trembling. Each strike was deliberate. For her mother. For her humiliation. For every life broken under Harry's cruelty. When it was done, Alison felt no triumph, only release. The Alpha King was condemned to the dungeon, left alive to rot in the silence he had created. That night, beneath a sky washed clean by rain, Matthew was crowned Alpha King. And when he turned to Alison, he did not command. He knelt. "Will you stand beside me?" he asked. "As my queen. By choice, not force." Alison lifted him to his feet. "Yes." Before the gathered kingdom, they marked each other, wolves howling as one beneath the full moon, not ruler and subject, but equals. And as their voices rose together, the moon watched once more, this time in approval, and so, under the watchful gaze of the moon, a healer who was meant to be caged became a queen who chose her crown. Alison's story was never about fate, it was about choice. The choice to save a stranger. The choice to stand tall in the face of tyranny. The choice to love not because she was commanded, but because she was seen. She lost everything. Her home, her parents, her safety. And yet she rose, not as a victim, but as a force the kingdom could no longer ignore. Matthew reclaimed his throne, not through bloodlust, but through truth. And together they proved that power does not corrupt the worthy, it reveals them. Now we want to hear from you. What moment hit you the hardest? Was it Alison refusing to beg? Her mother's final strength? The first time Alison chose love on her own terms? Or Harry finally facing justice? Do you believe Alison made the right choice when she saved the wounded stranger? Would you have done the same, knowing the cost? And tell us this. Do you think love chosen freely is stronger than a fated bond? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you angry, hopeful, or emotional, like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful heroines and shifter romances. And don't forget to subscribe, because the moon is far from done telling its stories. Until next time.